everybody, here we are. It's Vicksburg 160 and we are at the Railroad Redoubt. And this is a spot that I don't think gets as much attention, but this is the premier part on the south end of the Vicksburg National Military Park. We're going to get right into it. We got Chris White behind the camera. We got Chris Mackowski, and you saw Chris White's nod there. And we got Chris Mackowski doing his thing off to the side. We might hear from him as well. And we hope that right now you'll just click that share button, share this with your friends. We want as many people as possible to engage with this important American history. Now you can see we're overlooking the railroad. That was a railroad during the Civil War. That's why this is called the Railroad Redoubt. And that railroad connected Vicksburg with Jackson, and from Jackson to points throughout the Confederacy. This is the railroad that you could access at Vicksburg. This is one of the things that made Vicksburg the key. It's high bluffs and this railroad that could feed the Confederacy. Even if goods came from the Western Confederacy or the Trans-Mississippi in on the Red River, they could, because they control that part of the river, they could move up to Vicksburg and then by rail feed the rest of the Confederacy. And the Southerners knew this was important, and that's why they're going to construct this big redoubt here. Remember, you've got the Stockade Redan guarding the Graveyard Road. You've got the Great Redoubt and the 3rd Louisiana Redan guarding the Jackson Road. Well, here you have this impressive fortification. It's a large one. It might be one of the largest ones here at the Vicksburg National Military Park, guarding this critical railroad over here. Now, during the attacks on Vicksburg, this area didn't see fighting on the May 19th attacks, but on May 22nd, 1863, you have McClernand's troops over there, A.J. Smith's division, and some other people off in the distance, but most specifically Lawler's brigade and Landrum's brigade, and they are right across the way. You're probably looking toward the Iowa Monument now. There's a lot of Iowans in those brigades as well, but you've also got Kentucky, Ohio, Illinois, and other troops as well composing the attacking force. Mainly, you've got Landrum and Lawler coming in this direction here. Now, before they're going to come and attack across this field here, there's going to be a huge bombardment, and this fort will be pummeled for a couple of hours by McClernand's guns here, okay? To the point where the tip of this redoubt actually caves into the ditch, and it's going to provide an opportunity for some of these Union soldiers. The Confederates don't really have a good way to man that area there. Now, while I'm talking about it, if you look at that impressive Iowa monument, I think it's 1905 or 1906, and if you look at the woods right behind it, the members of the American Battlefield Trust, were able to help us preserve that land back there. And if it hasn't been, it will soon be transferred to the Vicksburg National Military Park. And that was the camp of the 22nd Iowa. Who's going to be involved in this attack? Right here. So it's not only a camp, but there's casualties back there, probably an aid station as well. So the guns fall silent. Here comes the Union attack, all from all those states and whatnot. And the Union is able to get across that terrible terrain you see here and access the side of this redoubt. A dozen of the Iowa boys, I think they're in the 22nd, are going to go into the ditch and lead some men into the redoubt, and they alone. You know, after the Confederates have suffered so many casualties in the bombardment, you got an Alabama battery and a Mississippi battery suffering significant casualties. The Confederate defenders leave. So these Iowans pour in, but McClernand has been conducting a larger attack. His force has been used up. He has no reinforcements. He scribbles a note to Grant. You know, the Stars and Stripes wave over the Great Redoubt. The Railroad Redoubt. We need reinforcements. Grant had nobody to send, but he did keep up his attacks to try to provide an opportunity for McClernand. The Confederates are short on reinforcements at this point, but luckily for them, here comes the Texans. Wall's Texas Legion, the only Texans actually serving in the fighting at Vicksburg, come charging across this area right over here and pitch into the Iowans. The Iowa and Illinois troops who were fanning out and getting behind the redoubt over here, they're able to push them back, and these men are running out of ammunition, and the Union troops will dejectedly, after such a chance for success here, maybe the best chance for success during the attack on May 22nd, fall back to their lines after suffering heavy casualties. At the entire siege, the Iowans alone suffered 1,800 casualties here. Now, as we walk, I mentioned McClernand. What? McClernand? McClernand launched this attack. His troops did the best. Well, if you start to look at him, he did some of the most dangerous missions on the Vicksburg campaign. Sorry, that's Chris pointing to me about all these. Look at these anthills behind me.
Dangerous
mission.
mission.
My God, I was about to, so thank you, Chris. So McClernand is one of the better performing corps commanders at this battle and siege there. I said it. And let me turn it over to Chris Mackowski, Emerging Civil War and Copey Hill American Battlefield Trust Fellow.
Thanks so much, Gary. And it is pretty incredible because McClernand is one of those guys, he's tough to love. And nobody in this army particularly loved him. William T. Sherman called him my demon spirit. He loathed McClernand. But McClernand does all of the heavy lifting through the most of the interior campaign here. He's the first person to cross the river and establish the beachhead. He essentially wins the Battle of Port Gibson single-handedly. He is going to stay between Grant's moving columns as they march into the interior of the state. He's going to stay between the columns and the rest of the army, so he'll always be on Grant's left flank. And Grant and his 3 corps move sort of like a 3-legged stool. And McClernand's always the one that's between Grant and the Confederates. When they get to the Battle of Jackson, he's going to be guarding the rest of the army, but then he's going to then lead the vanguard of the army as it goes to Champion Hill. He's going to do most of the fighting there. He's going to have the victory at the Big Black River. And so when he gets here to the outskirts of Vicksburg, he's had success after success after success. When he sees the 77th Illinois and the 22nd Iowa plant their flags on the front of this fortification, that's going to be his signal to say, hey, I've got a lodgment. I need help. He's going to ask for Sherman and McPherson to continue putting pressure on other parts of the line, like at Stockade Redan, where we were in an earlier video. And as a result of that, he's going to then ask for reinforcements to help with his lodgment here. The other 2 corps commanders, after this is all over, will really poo-poo him, but McClernand is actually going to pat himself on the back. And on May 30th, he's going to issue General Order 72 that's going to talk about how the successes of his men and how great they were and how they're the ones who have led the way in this whole campaign. And that's going to find its way into the newspapers, and it's going to violate an order that Grant had issued. Grant's been looking for an excuse to fire McClernand, and basically his breakthrough here is going to provide that, because McClernand writes about it, it shows up in the paper, and Grant finally has an excuse to say, you're fired.
And, and that says a lot about humanity. We like to look at these people in 2 dimensions, but when you expand them out to 3, think about it. Have you ever met somebody who's really capable at what they do, but you just don't like? Okay, some people are hard to like, and when they're hard to like, you don't exactly want to help them. Maybe you should, because they're really capable at what they do. And I sort of think that increasingly McClernand is emerging as maybe a difficult person, but somebody who is more capable of an officer, at least in the middle of 1863, than he's maybe portrayed. Now, 2 more things I want to do before we close. One, we're standing at the largest Texas monument outside the state of Texas. That's red Texas granite, of course, or pink Texas granite, as many people call it. Dedicated in 1961. You've got the Texas soldier there here on the site where Wall's Texas Legion came through and sort of saved the day for the Confederates. Maybe saved, well, a lot more siege time after that. Maybe it would have been a good thing. In any case, you can see yucca plants at the base, sort of bringing Texas here into Mississippi. You can see the 11 steps representing the 11 states represented in the Confederacy at that time, although people like to argue about the number of Confederate states sometimes, don't they? Lastly, off in the distance there, where Wall's men came from and way off to the left, is yet another spot that you, the members of the organization and supporters, have helped us to preserve and add to this park. So you're basically looking at everything in those woods there. It's a sizable tract. It will be transferred over to the Vicksburg National Military Park. So in this case, at a battlefield that was preserved early, and we haven't been able to make much headway because it's hemmed in by the town, we've been able to preserve acreage over both on the Iowa attack, where they came from and their camp, as well as where the defenders and sort of the saviors of the fort came in and defended it as well. So this is what we're able to do bit by bit, acre by acre, is reconstruct these battlefields like a puzzle piece. We appreciate you helping us with that. We appreciate you sharing this with your friends. We're thankful that you're able to watch these videos. Thanks to Chris White. Thanks to Chris Mackowski. Thank you all for watching and for supporting battlefield preservation and education.